You can almost feel it, can't you? That cold that seeps into your bones, the kind that doesn't just bite at your skin but gnaws at your very soul. Selara Moonridge knew it all too well tonight. The wind wasn't just wind, it was a predator, cutting through the cliffs of Frostvale Heights like knives, whipping her cloak around her trembling shoulders. Snow lashed at her face, biting her cheeks, freezing her hair in sharp, icy strands. Every step she took was uncertain, her paws slick against jagged rocks that jutted out like broken teeth from the mountain. And yet she ran. She ran because stopping wasn't an option, not now, not ever. Her chest heaved with ragged breaths, each inhale a battle against the storm, each exhale a whisper of fear she couldn't hide. Silver-flecked amber eyes glinted through the storm, wide and frantic, catching every shadow, every movement, every hint of danger that lurked behind the swirling white haze. Something was out there. Something was hunting her. She didn't know what it was yet, but her instincts screamed the truth before her mind could even catch up. There was a predator, and it knew her name. Pain seared through her paw as she stumbled over a hidden rock, and she hissed through gritted teeth, taste of copper and snow filling her mouth. The storm made it hard to hear anything, but she could feel it, the presence. Not just nearby but watching. Waiting. Breathing. It made her skin prickle, hairs stand on end, the very air around her charged like the storm itself recognized her terror. And then, almost reflexively, her hands sparked. A violet light flickered over her skin, delicate and beautiful but wild, uncontrolled. It pulsed like a heartbeat of fire against the cold, a reminder that she was not ordinary, that she was something more, something dangerous. She didn't know how to use it yet, didn't know if it would protect her or betray her. Selara's mind raced as her body pushed forward, slipping and scraping against frost-bitten rock. She remembered the words that had haunted her since she was a pup, whispered in fear and accusation by the Silverfen pack. Too dangerous. Too cursed. Not meant to walk among us. Every insult, every rejection, every flash of fear in those who called themselves family now roared inside her chest as fuel. She would survive tonight. She had to. Survival wasn't just instinct. It was vengeance. It was hope. It was the tiny ember inside her heart that refused to go out, no matter how much the world had tried to snuff it. The wind screamed like a chorus of lost souls, and every step forward felt like running through a maze of shadows. She barely noticed the cliff edge at first, the jagged drop that could kill her if one wrong movement slipped. Her mind was focused entirely on the chase, on the unseen force pressing close behind her, on the violet sparks that threatened to betray her with their flickering glow. And yet, as the wind whipped her hair across her face and her paw stung with fresh blood, she felt it. A strange pull, a warmth beneath the terror. It was that faint, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. She had thought she was alone for so long. Exiled, abandoned, feared. A creature born of fire and shadow, of something neither fully wolf nor fully human, wandering a world that wanted nothing of her. And now, in the teeth of this storm, with her body trembling and her heart hammering like a war drum, Selara realized that the fear wasn't just of whatever hunted her tonight. No. It was the fear of what she might become if she let the power inside her loose. If she let the violet flames run wild, would she survive, or would she turn into the very thing everyone had always whispered she was? A crack of lightning split the sky above, illuminating the cliffs in a brief, blinding white. For a moment she could see the world as it really was. The jagged edges of Frostvale Heights, the endless white expanse that seemed to stretch into nothingness, and the shadows that moved differently, unnaturally, as if the storm itself were alive and watching her. And in that instant she understood that running might not be enough. Survival might mean more than speed or cunning. Survival might mean embracing something she had spent her entire life fearing, the power that burned like a wild star inside her veins. Her breath came in ragged gasps, frost clinging to the edges of her lips, eyes darting to every flicker of movement, every shift of shadow. She felt the surge again, the violet spark, a reminder that she was not weak. That she had been given a fire for a reason, even if she did not yet understand it. And still the fear didn't leave her. Fear was sharper than the claws of the storm, sharper than any rock that could tear her paw. But it was mingled now with determination. She wouldn't let herself be prey. Not tonight. Not ever. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears like the pulse of some enormous unseen drum, and her mind was a storm all its own. Memories, instincts, terror, hope, all colliding in a chaotic symphony. Her legs burned, muscles screaming with exhaustion, yet she kept moving. One step. Then another. Every slip, every stumble, every cut only made her more aware of the life pulsing through her, of the fire that waited to be unleashed. She was a wolf, she was a shadow, she was a spark of chaos in a world that wanted her extinguished. And just as she felt the weight of despair pressing in, Just as she thought she might collapse under the endless white, she caught it. The sound. A flicker. Something different in the storm. Her ears twitched, alert, sensing a presence unlike the shadows that had stalked her before. A heartbeat strong and steady, cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. It made her stop just for a second, heart hammering so violently she feared it might break her ribs. The snowstorm raged, lightning flashed, the wind tore at her body. But in that moment, that single, sharp, terrifying, exhilarating moment, Selara realized she wasn't completely alone. And maybe, just maybe, someone or something was waiting for her. Waiting for her to make the next move. Waiting to see if she could rise, if she could fight, if she could survive. Waiting to see if she was more than the whispers and the fears of a world that never understood her. So she ran. Through pain, through fear, through ice and wind and shadow. She ran because giving up was not in her nature. Because hiding had never saved her before. Because tonight, Selara Moonridge would discover the edge of her own power, and whatever waited in the storm would learn exactly what it meant to chase her. And if you want to see where this storm takes her, if you want to feel every heartbeat, every flicker of violet fire, every terror and hope that comes with it, then you need to follow her journey. Subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections, where every heartbeat tells a story, where danger and love collide, and where Selara Moonridge's fire will ignite your soul. The snowstorm didn't let up. It rattled through the jagged cliffs of Frostvale Heights with relentless fury, howling in anger as if the very mountains were alive, alive with a hatred for those who dared trespass. Selara's paws slipped again over slick stone and she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of a boulder. Pain flared in her muscles, a sharp reminder that she wasn't invincible, not yet. She tried to focus, tried to push the terror aside, but something in the storm shifted. Not the wind, not the snow, but a presence. It was subtle at first, a weight pressing in her chest, a pulse that was too steady to belong to the chaos around her. And then he appeared. Raelen Duskbane stepped through the storm like he was part of it, his dark coat whipped by the wind but somehow untouched, his silhouette solid, unwavering, like a cliff carved from shadow and night. His presence wasn't loud. It didn't shout or demand. It simply existed. And it drew her attention, pulling her gaze through the chaos. Her heart stuttered in her chest, a heartbeat mismatched to the rhythm of the storm. She froze for the briefest fraction of a second, just long enough to feel the weight of him, the power, the danger, and something else. Something she couldn't name. He didn't run to her. He didn't rush with the careless bravery that so many had before. He watched. Quietly. Like a predator, yes, but not a cruel one. Calculated. Assessing. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, measured, cutting through the howl of wind. Selara Moonridge. Her body jerked involuntarily. He knew her name. Not from whispers, not from rumors, but as though he had always known. And in that single uttered name he had stripped away the mask she had worn for so long. The mask of fear, of exile, of being unwanted. Her eyes widened, heart hammering, because even in the storm his words were a tether. Proof that someone somewhere saw her. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish into the storm and pretend she had never heard it. But her legs refused to obey. Her paws ached. Her body trembled. The violet sparks along her hands flared once again, a small, desperate pulse of energy that mirrored the chaotic thrum in her chest. He noticed it, of course. She could feel it in the way his gaze sharpened, piercing through the white veil of snow like a blade. And somehow, despite her fear, despite the exhaustion, despite everything she had ever been told about being dangerous, about being cursed, something inside her dared to hold his gaze. The tension was tangible, a living thing. It thrummed in the space between them. She could feel it in the tightness of her shoulders, in the quickened pace of her breath, in the way her pulse thudded against her ribcage like it wanted to escape. And he stood there, unmoving, unreadable, yet completely aware of every nuance of her fear, every flicker of her hesitation, every spark of power that she could not yet control. "Why are you here?" she finally asked, her voice hoarse, barely cutting through the roar of the storm. The words themselves sounded strange to her ears, half accusation, half plea. And yet, even as she spoke, she knew she didn't fully want an answer. "Not yet. I came because you're here," he said, calm, deliberate, and somehow even in the chaos of the storm it felt intimate. It was a simple answer, and yet it carried weight, authority, and a strange, undeniable magnetism. His eyes met hers, sharp, dark, and unwavering, and for the first time in a long while, Selara didn't feel like a hunted creature. He felt like someone being measured, weighed, and seen. Truly seen, not as a weapon, not as a threat, not as a cursed girl, but as her. A flicker of fear mingled with something she hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. There was something in his eyes that drew her, something primal and raw, like the pull of a wolf calling to a wolf, like a tide she could not resist. Her body responded against her will, muscles tightening, senses sharpening. Even through the storm she felt the warmth radiating from him, the controlled, restrained power that could crush or protect, and her heart betrayed her with a leap she could not hide. Raelen stepped closer, though still careful, deliberate. Not enough to crowd her, but enough that the storm seemed to pause around him, as if even the wind respected him, or feared him. And yet there was a caution in his movements, a wariness that mirrored the storm in her chest. He wasn't a hero stepping in to sweep her away, not in the stories she had always imagined. He was a man with scars deeper than the visible ones on his skin, a man who carried his own demons, and perhaps she realized with a jolt, a man who understood what it meant to be hunted, feared, and misunderstood. She wanted to speak, wanted to demand that he leave her alone, wanted to run. But the words caught in her throat. Because even though the fear burned hot, because even though her body screamed to flee, there was a strange, undeniable pull toward him. Something in his presence made her remember the girl she had once been, before exile, before pain, before the weight of the prophecy and the violet flame. She remembered that spark inside her, the ember that refused to die, and for a fleeting heartbeat, she dared to hope that maybe she didn't have to face the world alone. Raelen's gaze didn't waver. There was recognition there. Respect. Something almost tender, though roughened by experience and battle and grief. He had seen what she was, perhaps not the full measure of her power, not yet, but enough to know she was more than what the world had condemned her to be. And that recognition, that simple act of seeing her, made her legs stop trembling. Made her breathe a fraction steadier. Made the violet sparks along her hands pulse in a rhythm that mirrored the sudden thrum of connection, dangerous and alive. And then he spoke again, softer this time, almost a whisper carried on the wind. "You don't have to run forever." Her heart froze. Simple words, and yet they carried more weight than any battle, any storm, any exile. In that single sentence he gave her a choice. The choice to continue hiding, to continue fleeing, or to trust, just for a moment, that someone could understand her, could see her, and could perhaps even protect her. Her chest heaved. Her muscles burned with fatigue. Snow and ice clung to her, soaking her to the bone. But in that moment, standing there, facing the alpha king of the Obsidian Fong pack, someone who should have been danger itself, she felt something she hadn't dared to feel in years. Possibility. Possibility that she wasn't completely alone. Possibility that the violet fire within her could be a gift, not just a curse. Possibility that Raelen Duskbane, the man who appeared from the storm like shadow made flesh, might see her, really see her for who she was, and not what the world had told him she should be. The storm howled, the wind tore, and the snow blurred the edges of the world, but Selara Moonridge stood still, her breath ragged, eyes wide, heart thrumming. And Raelen, he did not move away. He simply watched. Calculated. Waiting. And in the intensity of that gaze, the crackling tension in the space between them, the unspoken acknowledgement of danger and attraction and destiny, the world around her seemed to shrink until it was just the two of them. Hunted girl, powerful, broken, terrified, and the alpha who had stepped out of the storm and into her life, bringing the first flicker of hope she had dared to feel in a lifetime. And even as her instincts screamed to run, even as the violet fire pulsed violently against her palms, she could not. She could not move. Not yet. She couldn't leave. She couldn't ignore the pull, the recognition, the terrifying, exhilarating truth that whatever this man was, whatever storm had brought him to her, he had changed the rules. He had made it clear that tonight would not be just survival. Tonight would be the start of something far larger, far more dangerous, and far more intimate than Selara had ever imagined. And in the silence that fell just for a heartbeat, she realized she wanted to know more. To see if he could keep watching without judgment. To see if the storm could somehow become a bridge instead of a prison. To see if she could trust him. Selara stood there for a long moment, frozen by the snow, the storm, and the piercing gaze of Raelen Duskbane. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish into the white chaos, to melt into the cliffs and become nothing, to hide from the scrutiny of a world that had never been kind. But her legs refused to obey. The truth was heavier than the snow on her shoulders, heavier than the wind tearing through her hair, heavier than the blood and pain lacing every inch of her body. She carried the weight of a past that would not let her be free, the memories that clawed at her mind and demanded recognition. She remembered the first time she had felt the violet fire surge within her. She was just a pup, barely able to control her own body, when the flames had leapt from her chest in a burst of brilliant, dangerous light. Her Silverfen pack had gathered around her then, eyes wide with awe at first, but awe quickly twisted to fear. Whispers had followed her like shadows, cursed. Too dangerous. Not one of us. They hadn't called her by her name with warmth or kindness. They had called her by her potential to destroy. The memory struck her again now, more vividly than ever. The look on her mother's face, torn between pride and terror, had burned into her mind. Her father had said nothing, only stared as if the silence would shield him from the truth he could not face. And the rest of the pack, her friends, her family, had stepped back, recoiling as if even the air around her was toxic. Even the moon, her constant companion, had seemed to shiver when her violet flame danced. That was the moment she had learned that being powerful was a curse. That being different was a sentence. That survival was a constant battle not only against predators, but against those who should have loved her most. Her heart ached remembering the loneliness of nights spent curled in the frost, hiding the flicker of fire that she dared not unleash. Even her own name felt heavy, burdened with whispers she could not shake. Selara Moonridge. The girl who could destroy, the girl who could not belong. And yet here she was, standing in the teeth of a storm, breath ragged, heart racing, with Raelen Duskbane watching her as though she were not a threat, as though she were not dangerous, as though she were seen. That word, so simple, yet so heavy with meaning, reverberated in her mind. He saw her, not just her power, not just her scars, not just the violet sparks threatening to betray her with every pulse. He saw Selara. The girl behind the exile, the survivor behind the fear, the ember burning even when the world told her to go out. Her thoughts tumbled further back, spiraling into memories that hurt more than the snow in her fur, more than the jagged rocks beneath her paws. She remembered the day the council had summoned her, the day they had declared her too dangerous to remain among the Silverfen pack. She had been barely a yearling, trembling in the council hall as wolves she had known all her life turned their eyes to her with suspicion, judgment, fear. The elder alpha had spoken, words that still burned into her chest. "You are not one of us, Selara Moonridge. Your fire cannot be contained. Your presence endangers all." She had tried to protest, tried to explain that she could control the flames, that she only wanted to belong, that she only wanted to live without hiding. But no one listened. The council's eyes were hard, unyielding, and the pack's whispers were venom. "Cursed. Dangerous. Exile her before she burns us all." And that was how it began. How the wolf within her learned the bitter taste of rejection, the sting of fear from those she had trusted most. She had fled that night, tears freezing on her fur, paws slick with ice and mud as she ran into the forest, into the unknown. The world outside the Silverfen pack had been harsh, cruel, but it had taught her one thing that no council could take away. Survival required strength, cunning, and the acceptance that no one would protect you unless you allowed it. Every battle she had fought since, every night spent hiding, every narrow escape from predators or rival packs, had carved her into someone hardened, wary, dangerous, but also capable of feeling, capable of hope, capable of connection even if she didn't yet trust it. And now, in the presence of Raelen Duskbane, all of those years of loneliness and exile seemed to converge into a single fragile hope. Because he did not flinch at her violet fire. He did not recoil from the scars that laced her body like stories written in pain. He did not treat her as a threat or a weapon or a mistake. He treated her as Selara. Her chest tightened as conflicting emotions warred inside her. Fear screamed to run, to vanish into the storm and leave him behind. But curiosity, that dangerous spark, whispered that there was something worth staying for. That maybe, just maybe, someone could understand the weight she carried, could bear witness to her pain without judgment. That maybe she could trust, even if only for a moment. The violet fire along her hands pulsed again, responding to her storm of emotions. It was wild, unpredictable, dangerous just like her, and she hated that she could not control it fully. It flared higher as Raelen stepped closer, careful, deliberate, yet undeniably drawn to her. Not as prey, not as a prize, but as a being he acknowledged, respected, and perhaps in a way that terrified her, understood. She remembered the nights alone, curled against the cold earth, wishing for someone to notice her, To see beyond the exile, beyond the curse, beyond the flames. She had imagined heroes in the shadows, wolves who would take her hand and say, "I see you and I will protect you." He had never believed it could happen. And yet here he was. Raelen Duskbane. Alpha King of the Obsidian Fang Pack. Powerful. Scarred. Hauntingly beautiful in the way he moved, in the way he spoke, in the way his eyes met hers without flinching. Her throat tightened as a shiver ran through her, not from the cold, but from the intensity of being truly seen. And in that shiver, in that heartbeat that felt like it might split her chest in two, she realized something terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to let him in, to show him not the controlled mask she had worn all these years, but the raw, fragile, dangerous core of herself. The Selara Moonridge who had survived exile, who had survived the whispers and the fear, who had survived the very pack that had cast her out. And yet doubt still lingered, gnawed at her. Could she trust him? Could anyone? Her violet flames had burned friends and foes alike. Her power had always been a threat. To trust someone meant to show them the core of who she was. And if they turned away, if they rejected her, if they feared her, would she survive that too? Would the storm of heartbreak inside her finally consume what little warmth she had left? Raelen's gaze held her, unwavering, steady, patient, and somehow, even in the chaos of Frostvale Heights, she felt a small, dangerous flicker of hope. Hope that perhaps someone could see her as she was, not as the world had dictated, not as the exile, not as the cursed girl with fire in her veins. Hope that maybe she could begin to believe that her past did not define her future. The storm raged on, wind lashing, snow biting, cliffs trembling beneath the weight of the tempest. But for a single fragile heartbeat, Selara felt something she had not felt in years. The possibility of connection. Possibility of trust. Possibility of love. And with that thought, dangerous and exhilarating and terrifying all at once, she realized that the journey she had begun alone might now have a companion. A witness to her fire. A protector of her scars. A mirror to her soul. Raelen Duskbane had stepped from the storm and the world had shifted. Not yet in safety, not yet in certainty, but in recognition. And recognition, Selara knew, could be more powerful than any weapon, more dangerous than any rival pack, more illuminating than any fire she had ever borne. And as her violet flames pulsed softly against her palms, mingling with the storm and her racing heartbeat, she finally allowed herself a thought she had not dared to voice aloud in years. Maybe she was not alone. Selara Moonridge followed Raelen Duskbane through the storm, her paws sinking into the frost-bitten snow with every careful step. She felt the raw pull of the violet fire in her veins, a living pulse that seemed to respond to the unseen currents of the world around her. Frostvale Heights loomed behind them, jagged and indifferent, but ahead was Moonvale Grove, an ancient place whispered of in hushed tones by the elders of the Silverfen Pack. A place where wolf spirits lingered, where the past reached its claws into the present, where destiny itself seemed to wait for the bold, or the damned. The trees of Moonvale Grove emerged through the storm like shadows stitched from memory. Branches twisted and gnarled, their roots tangled like veins in the earth. Even in the wind, they hummed with presence, and Selara felt the hairs along her spine rise. Every step she took was a dialogue, silent yet insistent, between the grove and the violet fire that pulsed along her hands. Sparks danced across her skin, glowing brighter than ever, as if the trees themselves recognized her, acknowledged her, beckoned her forward. She could feel whispers along the currents of the wind, soft, haunting voices that brushed against her consciousness, echoing in her mind like echoes of ancestors long gone. "They know," she whispered under her breath, awe and fear mingling in her voice. The wind carried the words away, yet it seemed to answer her, shifting and murmuring as if in agreement. Her body trembled, not from the cold, but from the recognition that the world around her was alive in ways she had only glimpsed in dreams. The violet flames leapt higher now, swirling around her palms, tingling like lightning waiting to strike. And for the first time, Selara wondered if her fire was not merely a curse but a call. A signal. A thread woven into the very fabric of this grove and the destiny that awaited her. Raelen moved ahead silently, his presence a dark, solid counterpoint to the luminous pulse of her power. The snow clung to his coat, forming a brittle layer that glimmered faintly under the ghostly light of the moon, but he seemed untouched by the storm. He did not rush. He did not urge her forward. He merely walked as if he knew the grove would open its secrets to her when she was ready, and she would learn to embrace the burden of what she carried, not out of command but out of necessity. Selara's mind drifted again, unwillingly pulled into the corridors of memory. She recalled the fragmented stories she had grown up hearing, legends of the luminous mark, the child born of fire and spirit, a wolf with a heart bright enough to unite or shatter packs. The elders had spoken of it in riddles, in caution, in fear. The one with the luminous mark shall either bring unity or ruin, they had said, their eyes wide with terror and awe. She had buried the stories deep inside her, refusing to acknowledge the tiny spark of hope and fear that lingered there. And yet, standing now on the threshold of Moonvale Grove, the stories felt alive. Imminent. The grove opened like a secret. A clearing lay before her, shrouded in mist that swirled with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Moonlight filtered through the twisted branches, catching on the frost like shards of crystal, illuminating her path in pale silver. Every step she took seemed to reverberate through the grove, every spark of violet fire responding to the ancient pulse beneath the earth. She could hear it in the whisper of the leaves, in the groan of the wind through the branches, in the echo of shadows that moved too deliberately to be mere illusions. "They are here," she murmured, voice trembling. The shadows shifted, forming shapes that might have been wolves, might have been memories, might have been spirits caught between worlds. She could feel them in her chest, the eyes of ancestors watching, judging, waiting. They were not hostile, not yet. They were curious, drawn to the violet flame, to the fire that made her both dangerous and magnificent. And in that moment Selara understood with a clarity that stole her breath. She had never been ordinary. She had never belonged to any one pack, any one family, any one path. She was always meant to stand at the intersection of past and future, of destiny and chaos, of fear and hope. Raelen knelt beside her then, his hand brushing hers, grounding her in a reality that was otherwise a blur of mist and memory. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of command and wonder in equal measure. Selara swallowed hard, trying to reconcile the pulse of fear and exhilaration rising through her chest. I feel everything," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. The grove responded. Shadows deepened and swirled, the mist curling around her feet like living tendrils, and the violet fire along her hands pulsed brighter, almost as if it had understood her words. She could feel the prophecy in her bones, in her veins, in the very marrow of her heart. It was not distant. It was here. It was now. "The prophecy," Raelen said, eyes fixed on hers, steady, unwavering. "They speak of you, Selara, the one with the luminous mark. And I am here to make sure you survive what is coming." Her heart stuttered, caught between awe and terror. She wanted to believe him, to cling to the warmth that his words offered, but doubt gnawed at her. What if he was wrong? What if the violet fire inside her was more curse than gift, more destruction than destiny? What if she hurt him, or the innocent wolves who trusted her, or the fragile bonds she had yet to form? The prophecy promised either salvation or ruin, and the weight of choice was suffocating. I can't, she whispered, shaking. "I've never controlled it fully. I've never been safe for anyone, Raelen. Not for you. Not for the packs. Not even for myself." Raelen's hand tightened around hers, grounding her, anchoring her to something solid in the swirling chaos of fear and destiny. "Control is not the point, Selara," he said, voice almost lyrical, yet edged with command. "It's acceptance. You have the fire and it has chosen you. You cannot ignore it and you cannot run from it. But you are not alone. Alone." That word, repeated so many times in her life, felt different now. The grove pulsed with energy in response, as if the earth itself recognized her acceptance, acknowledged her courage. Shadows danced along the clearing's edge, whispering in tongues older than packs, older than moons, older than even the mountains. The one, the luminous, the unity or ruin. The voices were a symphony of warning and promise, teasing her with visions of what could be, of what might come. Selara's legs trembled as she stepped deeper into the clearing, violet flames licking higher along her arms, responding to the invisible currents of destiny that wrapped around her. Every nerve, every sinew of her being screamed with awareness, every pulse a reminder of the immense power she carried. And yet, alongside that awareness, there was an unfamiliar thrill, an exhilaration that made her feel larger than life, untouchable, yet exquisitely fragile. Raelen watched her, silent and steady as she moved. He did not flinch at her power. He did not flinch at the tremor in her hands, the wild flickers of fire, the way her amber eyes seemed almost too bright for the darkness around them. Something in his gaze made her breath catch. Recognition, understanding, perhaps even awe. And for a single fragile heartbeat she allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, she could harness this fire. That maybe she could fulfill what the prophecy demanded. That maybe she could be the wolf who united, not the one who destroyed. The wind shifted then, carrying with it a whisper of warning, a scent of something ancient and vigilant. Frost whispered across her fur like fingers brushing her spine. She froze, eyes scanning the misty grove. The shadows deepened. The ancestors watched. And through it all, the violet flames pulsed hotter, responding not only to her power, but to her fear, her hope, her doubt. "Destiny is never gentle," Raelen murmured. "It does not ask if you are ready. It does not wait for courage. It comes, and you must meet it." Selara swallowed hard, heart hammering, mind swirling with centuries of whispers, with legends, with prophecy. The pull of destiny grew stronger with every breath, with every heartbeat, with every pulse of violet fire. The grove itself seemed to lean closer, ancient and expectant. And she, for all her doubts, all her fears, all her haunted past, felt it, the undeniable, intoxicating, terrifying truth. She was meant to be here. She was meant to face this. She was meant to ignite the flame that could either save or shatter everything she had ever known. And for the first time in her life, Selara Moonridge did not turn away from the fire. The moon hung heavy and crimson above Moonvale Grove, its light spilling across the frost-kissed clearing like blood on silver ice. Selara Moonridge felt the pulse of the earth beneath her paws, the surge of violet fire along her veins, the unrelenting hum of destiny calling her forward. But before she could even fully breathe it in, the world shifted. Danger arrived not as a whisper, but as a roar, tearing through the grove like a blade of pure chaos. The Iron Fang pack descended from the shadows, claws glinting, fangs bared, eyes burning with hatred that had no beginning and no end. They moved as one, a tide of violence that crashed into the sacred ceremony already in motion, shattering centuries of reverence in a heartbeat. Wolves screamed, packs scattered, and the very ground seemed to tremble beneath the weight of their aggression. Selara froze for a heartbeat, heart hammering as the first of the iron fangs lunged. The violet fire in her veins flared uncontrollably, sparks leaping from her fingertips in wild arcs. Her body moved on instinct, weaving, ducking, spinning, her claws scraping against stone and frost as she defended herself and those around her. Every strike she delivered was a mixture of fear and fury, every motion a negotiation with the fire she still barely understood. She could feel the eyes of Raelen on her, grounding her, yet also pushing her to survive. His presence was both anchor and mirror, and even as chaos consumed the grove, she drew strength from it. The attackers were relentless. The Iron Fang Alpha roared, a sound that shook the very branches above, and his voice carried accusation, venom, and fear of the power Selara embodied. "The luminous mark cannot exist. She will destroy everything." Every word struck her like a knife. They feared her because they recognized the potential she carried, potential no one had dared nurture, no one had dared understand. And that fear, Selara realized with a pang of anger and sorrow, had already poisoned the world against her. Raelen moved beside her like a shadow given form, muscles coiled, eyes hard as stone. Yet even in his ferocity she could feel the conflict raging behind those dark irises. The moment was not merely a battle for survival. It was a battle for loyalty, for love, for the fragile trust that had begun to thread between them. Every time an Iron Fang lunged at her, every spark of violet fire she unleashed in desperation, he flinched not at her power, but at the possibility that the world might claim her before she could claim herself. A claw slashed too close to her shoulder, tearing her cloak and drawing a line of blood that stung with cold. She flinched, spinning, sending a pulse of violet flame into the attacker, and for a split second the grove illuminated in brilliance. It was dazzling, frightening, and utterly uncontrollable, a reflection of her heart itself. And then she heard it. The voices of the Iron Fang pack, the elders of other packs, even the whispers of ancestors carried in the wind. All demanding, accusing, condemning. "Leave. You are a danger." Leave her. Selara's ears flattened. Her eyes widened, her heart slammed against her ribs. And in that instant she understood the impossible truth. Even Raelen could not stop the world from choosing, could not shield her from the fear that had hunted her all her life. She looked to him, hoping, pleading silently, and he met her gaze with a clench of jaw, a hardness of expression that broke her heart even as it bolstered her courage. His eyes were saying, "Survive. Flee. Life." The grove erupted around her. Fangs met fur. Claws met claws. Sparks of violet fire licked the air like lightning in a storm. Wolves screamed, rolled, collided, vanished into the mist. And through it all, Selara ran, propelled by fear, by adrenaline, by the desperate need to protect both herself and the tiny, fragile hope of a connection that had begun to form with Raelen. She stumbled over frost-tipped roots, rolled, sprang, and tore across the clearing. Every nerve in her body screamed, yet she felt the pull of the fire, the pulse of the prophecy, urging her forward, demanding she survive, demanding she live to see another dawn. Her amber eyes flared as violet sparks erupted from her hands, striking at attackers, blinding, searing, warning those who would dare approach. Every swing, every leap, every heartbeat was a negotiation with her power, her destiny, and the raw, unyielding fear of failure. Behind her, Raelen did not follow, not immediately. He stood at the edge of the chaos, jaw tight, fists clenched, a storm contained within him as if the fury of the Iron Fangs had ignited something primal inside him. Yet even as he did not move, she could feel his will, his silent promise, threading through the storm. "I will not abandon you. I will protect you even if the world calls me traitor." The Iron Fang Alpha's roar tore through the grove again, louder, more menacing. "You have no right to be here. You bring death to the sacred moon." His words struck Selara like ice, each syllable an accusation that echoed the fears she had carried since exile. And with those words, the elders, the council, even some of Raelen's own pack began to step forward, their judgment heavy, their voices heavy, their fear palpable. They ordered her to leave. Selara froze, chest heaving, muscles trembling, fire flaring uncontrollably. She saw the flash of Raelen's eyes, torn, conflicted, dangerous in their intensity. He knew that if she stayed it could mean death. For her. For him. For the fragile hope that was threading between them. And he would not condemn her to die, not when the world was too cruel already. She made the choice in a heartbeat that shattered everything she had been taught. She ran. Not out of cowardice but out of necessity. Every stride was a defiance. Every leap a rebellion against the judgment that had hounded her for so long. Sparks of violet fire trailed in her wake, illuminating the path like a trail of living starlight, marking the world with her existence even as she vanished from the grove. Raelen clenched his jaw as he watched her disappear into the swirling snow, heart tight, fists trembling. The battle raged behind him, the packs clashing, the sacred ceremony desecrated, but in that moment, all he could see was her. Selara, fleeing, fire in her veins, terror in her eyes, the very essence of everything worth fighting for. And in that clenching of his chest, he made a vow that echoed louder than the roar of any alpha, louder than the fury of any pack. He would protect her. He would keep her alive. He would stand against the world itself if it meant she would survive. The grove behind him erupted in chaos, snow and sparks of violet fire mingling in a blinding swirl, but Raelen did not move. He did not strike. He did not intervene, not yet. His mind was a storm of loyalty and desire, fear and fury, love and impossibility. The world had spoken. It had chosen its path and for now it had forced her to run. But he would not let the world dictate the next step. Not if he could help it. And so, with the crimson moon casting shadows across the desecrated grove, Raelen Duskbane stood alone, a fortress of will and power, eyes fixed on the path she had taken. He could feel her fear, her pain, her fire, and in the pit of his soul, something fierce, something unrelenting took root. Selara Moonridge had fled, but he would find her. He would protect her. He would teach her that the world could not destroy what was born of fire, of destiny, of love. Because the first clash had only begun. The air in Twilight Cavern was thick with the scent of damp stone and lingering smoke. Firelight danced across the stalactites above, flickering in rhythmic shadows, painting the walls with gold and amber reflections that seemed to move with a pulse of their own. Selara Moonridge hugged her knees, shivering, Not from cold, though the cavern was frigid, but from the exhaustion, the adrenaline, the ache that had built up in her chest after the chaos of the Ironfang attack. Violet sparks still lingered along her fingertips, tiny, uncontrollable flares that hummed with her heartbeat, as though demanding recognition, as though demanding trust. Raelen Duskbane sat across from her, the firelight catching the faint scars along his jaw, along the edge of his shoulders, and the powerful, silent weight of him radiated calm and certainty in the midst of the storm that still raged outside. He did not speak immediately, only observed, only breathed, only allowed the cavern to hold them both in the fragile cocoon of heat and shadow. His presence was grounding, like a deep current beneath turbulent waters, steady and sure, and for the first time in a long time, Selara allowed herself to feel the possibility of safety without fear. Finally, his voice came low and soft, almost a whisper against the echoes of dripping water. "You're trembling," he said, and though it was a simple observation, it carried weight. It carried the understanding that had eluded her entire life. He did not need to explain. He did not need to hide. Her fire, her scars, her fear, they were all visible, all acknowledged, and somehow in his voice, they were allowed to exist without judgment. Selara drew a shaky breath, her hands clenching and unclenching as the violet sparks danced. It's always like this," she admitted, voice small, vulnerable. "My power. I can't control it. I've hurt people before, people I cared about. She faltered, swallowing hard as the memory of her exile, of burned packs, of whispered curses and fearful stares, pressed against her chest like a weight that could crush her. She wanted to run, to hide, to vanish into the shadows of the cavern and never return. But Raelen's presence kept her anchored, a tether to a world that might finally be safe, that might finally understand. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes dark and focused, and spoke with the same quiet intensity that made her feel seen in ways she had never known. "Selara, I've seen loss, betrayal, pain. I've lost people I cared for, my first love before I became who I am now. She betrayed me, left me to survive alone, and I swore I would never let that happen again. Not to anyone I care about." His jaw tightened, and for a heartbeat the flicker of a ghost in his eyes made her ache. She wanted to reach across the fire, to touch him, to comfort him, but something held her back. The old fear, the instinct to protect herself from disappointment, from loss, from the truth that connection could hurt more than solitude ever would. She lowered her gaze, watching the violet sparks lick against her palms, tiny, dangerous, alive. "I've always been dangerous," she admitted softly, voice trembling. "Since I was a pup, I've been told I could hurt people. I've been exiled. I've been feared, even by my own pack. And now," she paused, swallowing, heart pounding, "I can't control this fire. I don't know what it wants or what it will do if I fail. I can't." "You're not failing," Raelen interrupted gently, stepping closer, the firelight reflecting in the depths of his amber eyes, warm and steady. "Selara, listen to me. I see you, all of you. Not what they fear, not what the prophecy demands, just what you are." Her breath caught, and the violet sparks along her fingers pulsed brighter, as if the fire itself had recognized the words. She dared to look up, met his gaze, and for the first time in years she felt the weight of being truly understood. There was no judgment, no fear, no expectation. Only acknowledgement, steady and unwavering, and in that acknowledgement, a fragile trust began to bloom. Raelen shifted closer still, until the firelight caught the edges of his face, softening the harsh lines of battle and scar. His hand hovered near hers, not pressing, not demanding, only present, a silent invitation. Selara's chest ached as she imagined the warmth of his touch, the strength it would lend her, the safety it promised. Her mind screamed at her to retreat, to remember the betrayals, the fear, the pain, the exile, the flame, but her heart, wild and untamed, leaned forward. Almost. Her lips parted, almost closing the space between them, the fire in her veins thrumming with every heartbeat. She could feel the pull, the magnetic draw of him, the way his presence seemed to echo her own, balancing her fear with calm, her power with patience, her fury with understanding. And in that moment the world outside the cavern, the chaos of packs, the terror of prophecy, all of it faded. It was just them. Two hearts, two souls, dangerous, broken and yearning, suspended in firelight and shadow. But Selara hesitated. Doubt pressed against her ribs like the weight of 1,000 winters. Could she risk it? Could she risk showing him all of herself, knowing what she was capable of? The violet flames pulsed hotter, as if echoing her hesitation, demanding warning, reminding her of everything she had survived, everything she had been told she would never survive. And in that hesitation, the tension between them tightened, tangible, a wire strung taut, quivering with the unspoken, the almost, the danger of the heart reaching for something it had never been allowed to touch. Raelen's hand brushed hers at last, light as mist, but enough. Enough to anchor, enough to reassure, enough to promise that the world outside could wait, that nothing had to be conquered yet, that the fire in her veins, the fear in her chest, the scars she carried, all of it, was seen and accepted. "Trust me, Selara," he said softly, voice low, resonating with something deeper than words. "Or leave. But whatever you choose, I will not judge you. I will not falter. I will meet you where you are, even in the storm of your fire." Her pulse thundered in her ears. The violet sparks danced higher along her fingertips, tendrils of light curling as if acknowledging the fragile bond forming between them. For the first time, Selara felt the possibility of letting someone in without fear of judgment, without fear of betrayal, without fear that her power would isolate her forever. A trembling hope threaded through her heart, tentative but real, fragile but undeniable. They lingered there, the cavern holding them in a bubble of warmth and shadow, firelight and quiet, where words were minimal but meaning was infinite. Their eyes met in understanding, in acknowledgement, in the unspoken promise that whatever trials lay ahead, whatever storms, whatever enemies, they would not face them alone. Her lips hovered near his again, almost touching, almost daring to bridge the space that fear had held her in for so long. The almost kiss, electric in its tension, spoke of longing, of fear, of tentative trust. It was a promise of what could be, not a certainty, a flicker of possibility that made her chest ache with yearning. And then she hesitated again, trembling not from cold, but from the raw intimacy of being seen, truly seen for the first time in her life. Raelen's hand remained steady, unwavering, brushing hers, grounding her, reassuring her. "I see you, Selara. All of you," he repeated, and the firelight reflected in his eyes made them seem almost infinite, endless in patience, endless in understanding. Not what they fear, just what you are. And for a single breathtaking heartbeat, Selara let herself believe it. Let herself imagine a world where fire was not fear, where love was not betrayal, where trust could exist without breaking her. The violet flames along her fingertips pulsed brighter, responding to the surge of emotion, weaving with the fire in her heart, echoing the rhythm of something new, fragile and dangerous: hope. In that moment, the cavern, the firelight, the shadows, the silence became sacred. Not the grove, not the prophecy, not the pacts, but this connection. This fragile, trembling bridge between two hearts that had both been broken and scarred, yet still dared to reach for each other. And as the violet sparks curled along her fingers, casting shimmering light across the stalactites, Selara Moonridge felt something she had never felt before. The possibility of love, untamed but safe, dangerous but welcome, fierce but enduring. The storm outside could rage, the pacts could clash, the prophecy could wait. Here in Twilight Cavern, for this heartbeat, the world had narrowed to firelight, shadow, and the impossible fragile intimacy between two wounded, powerful souls. The moon hung low, a sickly amber in the night sky, casting elongated shadows across the obsidian hollow. Selara Moonridge's paws sank into the frost-laden earth, each step dragging a weight she could barely comprehend. The weight of her destiny, the weight of her fire, and now, the weight of betrayal. She had come seeking safety, seeking understanding, seeking perhaps even belonging, and yet, tonight, all of that lay in ruins. Werewolf Moonridge, her own blood, her cousin, stood at the center of the council gathering, claws flexed, eyes blazing with malice and certainty. Selara's heart twisted at the sight. Werewolf's words, sharp as obsidian, shattered the fragile calm she had fought to cling to. "She is the one," Werewolf announced, voice echoing through the cavernous council hall. "The child of the violet flame, the luminous mark. She carries power that will destroy us all." The words struck Selara like ice water, and for a heartbeat the world stopped. Her amber eyes widened, pupils shrinking, the violet fire along her veins spiking in violent arcs of uncontrolled energy. Every whispered doubt she had ever held, the fears of exile, of judgment, of destruction, rose to the surface like a tide determined to drown her. She had hoped to keep her secret, to prove herself worthy of trust, to stand beside Raelen as an equal, and now every fragile thread of that hope had been severed. The council erupted in murmurs, then cries, then outright panic. Elders recoiled, claws raking the air as if they could physically push back the fire within her. Whispers of fear, thick and venomous, snaked through the hall. Her violet flame, it will destroy us. She cannot be allowed to remain, she must be cast out. Each word hammered at her chest, each syllable a dagger. Selara's ears flattened against her skull. Her breaths came fast, shallow, ragged, and yet beneath the shock there was something else. Something dark, molten, building within her like a storm waiting to break. Raelen stepped forward, tall and unyielding, yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed the conflict raging inside him. The council's gaze snapped to him, expectant, demanding allegiance, judgment. And for a heartbeat Selara saw the struggle in his eyes. The love he had shown, the understanding he had given, the patient presence that had held her through fear and doubt. It clashed violently with his duty, with his pack, with the expectations of his alpha position. He was torn. And in his indecision, Selara felt the bitter truth of solitude settle on her shoulders. Her violet fire flared then, responding not to her fear but to the raw surge of betrayal, heartbreak, and fury that had been bottled inside her for years. Sparks leapt from her fingers, arcs of violet lightning that sizzled through the air and left the very walls of the council hall trembling. The air grew heavy, thick with static, with power that could not be contained. The elders staggered back, faces pale, eyes wide, and Varric faltered under the intensity of the display he had sought to provoke. I am not your sacrifice, Selara whispered, voice trembling, raw with the intensity of every fear and fury she had ever carried. I am not your weapon. I am not your pawn. Come to me, and I will decide what I am, not you. Not anyone. With that she unleashed a pulse of violet fire, so brilliant and violent that the council chamber itself seemed to scream. Shadows fled from the corners, wooden beams groaned under the pressure, and frost exploded from the ground in jagged patterns, glittering like shards of shattered stars. The iron-fang whispers of fear, the murmurs of judgment, the condemnations, all of it recoiled in the presence of her power, and for the first time, Selara realized the magnitude of what she carried. Raelen's eyes widened, both awe and terror mirrored in their depths. He stepped forward, instinctively reaching for her, yet stopped short, restrained by his own fear and the fury in her amber gaze. You must," he began, voice tight, torn between command and desire, but she shook her head violently, cutting him off without words. The fire in her veins demanded release, demanded space, demanded acknowledgement that she would not be controlled, not even by him. Varric lunged then, shouting, "You will bring ruin to all of us." And the air exploded with violet sparks as Selara met him, claws raised, fire coiling around her like a living thing. She did not strike to kill, not yet. She struck to warn, to assert, to show the council, to show Raelen, to show herself that she could no longer be contained by the fear of others. The violet flames writhed and danced, illuminating the betrayal that had been hidden beneath the veneer of family loyalty, the deception that had undermined every fragile step she had taken toward trust and connection. The council shrank back, trembling. Wolves cried out in alarm and fear. Some tried to intervene, some tried to reason, some tried to cast spells of containment, but nothing could withstand the raw surge of Selara's unbridled energy. And in that unrelenting power, there was not only fury, but a clear, uncompromising declaration. She was no longer the scared, exiled pup who had fled Silverfen Pack. He was something greater. Something the world feared. Something the prophecy had promised. And yet, as the fire roared around her, as the council faltered, as Varric recoiled in shock and fear, Selara felt her heart fracture again. Because the one person she had trusted above all, Raelen, was still watching, still torn between love and duty. His hand was outstretched, hesitating, yearning to bridge the distance, yet restrained. And she realized bitterly that love alone could not protect her from the world. Not now. Not ever. With a roar that tore through the chamber and shook the frost-laden earth, Selara turned, fleeing into the night, leaving sparks and whispers in her wake. Her cloak whipped behind her like the tail of a comet, her amber eyes blazing with determination and fury. She would not be caged. She would not be dictated to. She would claim her destiny on her own terms. And as the council's cries faded behind her, as Raelen's restrained voice called after her, as the world recoiled from the power she unleashed, she vowed silently, fiercely, unbreakably. I will rise. I will survive. I will master this fire. And I will show them all that the wolf with the violet flame is no mere pawn. I am Selara Moonridge. And I will decide what I am. The night swallowed her, mist curling around her like a protective veil, and the world, so judgmental, so fearful, so blind to the truth of what she could be, was left to tremble in the aftermath of betrayal. The seeds of destiny had been sown, watered with fury and heartbreak, and from them would rise a power that could either save or shatter all she had ever known. Behind her, Raelen remained torn, furious, heartbroken, unable to move fast enough to reach her but unable to let go of the silent vow he had made in that chamber. No matter the cost, he would find her, he would stand beside her, and he would protect her from the world, and perhaps from herself, until she was ready to claim the fire fully. And in the echo of her footsteps fading into shadow and snow, the prophecy whispered again, clearer than ever. The luminous mark shall either unite the packs, or shatter them all. And Selara, violet fire raging, heart alight with defiance, vowed that she would not be broken, not by blood, not by betrayal, not by fear. She would forge her destiny with her own claws, her own fire, her own heart. The sky over Eclipse Altar was a canvas of molten shadow and silver light. Clouds twisted unnaturally, torn by winds that carried both the chill of the high peaks and a foreboding pulse of magic that seemed to hum beneath the ground. Selara Moonridge's paws struck the frost-cracked stone as she raced toward the altar, her cloak trailing behind her like a comet of violet fire. The night air was thick with anticipation, charged with electricity, alive with whispers of the past and warnings of the future. Every nerve in her body screamed that this was the moment she had been forged for, yet terror threatened to crush her courage with the weight of every exile, every whispered curse, every betrayal she had endured. The ritual was already underway. Wolves from every allied pack circled the altar, their shapes tense, their eyes flicking to the shadows that writhed around them like living darkness. The ground trembled as the shadow beasts emerged, hulking, malformed, eyes burning red with malice that seemed to draw heat from the very marrow of the mountains. Their roars split the air, shaking frost from the jagged peaks and sending a shiver down the spines of all who watched. Raelen Duskbane stood at the center, alpha stance unwavering, yet every muscle in his body screamed tension. Claws flexed, tail lashing, eyes blazing with protective fury. He had fought through pack politics, betrayal, and prophecy to stand here, but even his presence could not contain the encroaching darkness. And then, just as the Shadow Lord Karath Nyx's presence began to seep into the altar like a tangible shadow, a streak of violet fire tore through the frozen night. Selara appeared atop the outer cliffs, cloak billowing like a banner of defiance, her amber-flecked eyes blazing with the intensity of a storm. Violet sparks danced along her hands, trailing behind her as if the fire had its own life, her power no longer reluctant, no longer hesitant. She drew a deep breath, the cold air biting at her lungs, and in that moment she felt the pulse of her ancestors, the wolves who had run under silver moons, the spirits who had whispered to her in dreams, guiding her, teaching her, lending their strength to hers. "I am not your sacrifice," she shouted, voice carrying across the altar, every word igniting the frost beneath her paws. "I am not your pawn. I am Selara Moonridge, child of the violet flame, and I will decide what I am." The shadow beasts faltered, their snarls catching in their throats as the violet fire flared higher. Sparks licked across the ruins surrounding the altar, freezing the air with brilliance, illuminating jagged carvings of ancient wolf spirits along the stone. The mountains trembled, a low groan vibrating through the very ground beneath their feet, and from deep within the altar long-dormant ruins stirred, awakening as if the stones themselves recognized the claim she had made. Raelen's eyes widened in awe and disbelief, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly as he saw the full scale of her power. He wanted to reach for her, to ground her, to ensure she did not lose herself in the fire, but he also understood with a pang of fear and pride that this was hers to command. She was no longer the hunted, no longer the exiled, no longer the girl who trembled at whispers of fear. She was the storm itself, and all who opposed her would either bend or break. Selara extended her arms, violet fire spiraling upward, coiling around the altar in radiant arcs that danced like living serpents. Shadows of her ancestors materialized in ghostly forms around her, silver-furred, eyes aglow with knowledge and fierce pride. Their voices rose as one, chanting in a tongue older than the mountains, older than the prophecy, older than any fear that had dared cage her. The energy surged through her, through the altar, through the very peaks, vibrating in a resonance that made the mountains hum and the air shimmer with power. The Shadow Lord Karath Nyx stepped from the darkness then, massive, impossibly dark, a swirling silhouette of malice and intent. His eyes were voids, swallowing light and warmth, seeking to unmake what had been. Every muscle in Selara's body tightened, every instinct screamed danger, yet she did not hesitate. She faced him, fire in her veins, ancestors at her back, determination anchoring her heart like a blade of pure intent. "You have hunted me. You have threatened my people. You have sought to make me your weapon," she said, voice carrying over the roaring winds, carrying across the trembling altar. "But I am not yours. I am not anyone's. I am Selara Moonridge, and I choose myself." A pulse of violet fire erupted from her hands, a wave that cascaded outward, illuminating the frozen peaks and striking the shadow beasts with a brilliance so pure, so raw, that their forms wavered and twisted, recoiling from the intensity. Wolves in the surrounding packs froze, awestruck, fear mingling with reverence as the altar seemed to hum in response to her power. Mountains trembled again, the ruins around them cracking and shifting as if waking from centuries of slumber. The energy was alive, uncontainable, and undeniably hers. Raelen moved then as if drawn by the fire itself, sprinting across the altar toward her, but careful to maintain distance. He could feel the heat, the power, the intensity of what she had become. Pride, fear, love, all tangled in his chest as he realized she had surpassed every limitation, every expectation, every prophecy whispered by fearful mouths. He was unstoppable. She was fire. He was destiny. Karath Nyx hissed, the shadows around him writhing and pulling, seeking to consume the light, but Selara's fire surged, a living storm, weaving in intricate arcs of violet brilliance. Every heartbeat, every pulse of energy, was synchronized with the spirits at her back, and the altar itself seemed to respond, glowing, trembling, alive. She had become the bridge between the living and the ancestral, between fear and power, between destiny and self-determination. The shadow beasts and rival packs faltered, their fear palpable, their attacks hesitating in the face of her fury. Even Raelen's pack, previously divided and anxious, watched in awe as Selara fully embraced what they had once feared. Her fire no longer threatened indiscriminately, it struck with precision, intention, command. She was no longer reactive. He was proactive. She was authority incarnate. And then, in the stillness that followed her unleashed wave of power, the Shadow Lord emerged fully from the abyss, massive and dark, a swirling vortex of malevolence and intent. The air thickened around him, oppressive, suffocating, yet Selara did not falter. She inhaled deeply, channeling the pulse of her ancestors, the fire in her veins, the love and trust that had sustained her through every betrayal and exile. "I am not your sacrifice," she repeated, louder this time, a cry that echoed across the mountains, down into the valleys, and through the hearts of every wolf present. "I am not your weapon. I am the child of the violet flame, and I choose my own destiny." The ground shuddered beneath the altar, sparks of violet light dancing along the cracks in the stone. Wolves cowered, some inspired, some terrified, but none could ignore the power radiating from Selara. The Shadow Lord stepped forward, and the first clash between darkness and fire began. An epic standoff that would determine not only the fate of the ritual, but the balance of every pack, every mountain, every heart that dared hope in the presence of the violet flame. And as the storm of energy crackled around her, as the mountains trembled, as ruins shifted and awoke beneath the firelight, Selara Moonridge stood tall, unwavering, untamed, and undeniably herself. She had claimed her power. She had claimed her destiny. And the world, darkness, prophecy, rivals, and even the alpha she loved, was left to reckon with the force of a wolf who would no longer be anyone's pawn. The wind had calmed, but the air still trembled, heavy with the echoes of fire and fury. Frost hung in the trees like shattered glass, glinting in the pale moonlight. Selara Moonridge stood on the edge of Eclipse altar, breath heaving, fur matted with snow and the residue of her own violet fire. Around her the wolves, allies and rivals alike, watched, their eyes wide, their hearts uncertain. Even the mountains seemed to hold their breath, waiting for what would come next. Raelen Duskbane stood a few paces away, his gaze locked on her, burning with pride, fear and something unspoken, a longing that neither of them dared voice fully. The distance between them felt infinite and yet so small, as though one step could bridge the chasm of betrayal, prophecy and fire. Selara's amber-flecked eyes met his, searching, questioning, and for a fleeting heartbeat, vulnerability shone through her defiance. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? The question drifted on the wind, unspoken yet impossible to ignore, pressing into the hearts of every wolf, every observer, every listener in the darkness beyond. The world had seen her power, her fire, her defiance, but did they see her as a hero or merely as a threat? Did they see Selara Moonridge, the wolf who had endured exile, betrayal and prophecy, or only the violet flame that scorched all who dared to doubt her? Her paws sank into the frost, claws catching the ice, and she felt the pulse of every choice she had ever made, the leaps of faith, the moments of fear, the sparks of hope that had guided her through storm and shadow. She thought of her ancestors whispering through the night, urging her to stand tall, to embrace her destiny. Yet even their voices could not answer the deepest question, the one that throbbed in her chest with every heartbeat. Would she ever truly be accepted, loved, or understood? Raelen's voice, low and tentative, broke the silence. Even now His words faltered, the weight of unspoken truths and unmade choices hanging between them like a fragile thread. She wanted to step toward him, to reach for the warmth, the connection, the grounding presence he had always offered. And yet she could not. Her fire would not allow her to soften fully, not while the world still trembled with fear of what she might become. Around them the allied wolves shifted uneasily. Some whispered their awe, some their fear, and some wondered if the girl with the violet flame could truly survive the destiny that had been forced upon her. Every glance, every breath, every heartbeat was a question. Will you choose her side, or will you turn away? Selara inhaled deeply, the cold biting at her lungs, grounding her even as the fire within raged like a storm restrained only by sheer will. Her eyes lifted to the moon, pale and brilliant, and she whispered to herself, a vow and a question all at once. I will decide who I am, even if the world does not understand. And then, with the night hanging heavy and quiet around her, the subtle lyrical call reached out to every heart listening, every soul drawn to her journey. If Selara's story stirred your heart, if the fire of love, destiny and courage burned within you even for a moment, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections, where every heartbeat tells a story and every tale of love and destiny ignites the soul. Follow her journey, walk alongside her through shadow and flame, and witness the rise of a wolf who refuses to be anyone's pawn. The wind whispered again, carrying the question far beyond the altar, far beyond the mountains, into the hearts of all who would listen. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? And as the violet flames flickered in Selara's gaze, the answer remained suspended in the night, impossible to grasp, waiting for the next heartbeat, the next choice, the next story. Mist curled around the towering pines of Shadowfen Woods, drifting like restless spirits over frost-dusted earth. Every step Selara Moonridge took was careful, silent, yet deliberate, her claws sinking into the wet soil as if anchoring herself to the fragile certainty that she was alive, that she had survived, and that her fire had been claimed. Beside her, Raelen Duskbane moved with quiet caution, alpha presence restrained, every sense alert to the unseen dangers lurking in the darkness beyond the veil of mist. The woods seemed alive, holding their breath, stretching their shadows toward the fleeing pair as though warning them that the night was far from over. Fog wound through the roots of gnarled trees, curling in ghostly shapes that toyed with the mind, suggesting movement that might or might not be real. Selara's amber-flecked eyes pierced the dimness, catching faint glimmers of violet light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The fire that had burned so brightly atop Eclipse Altar now simmered in her veins, controlled yet hungry, whispering in a language only she could understand, the language of power, destiny and vengeance yet unclaimed. Every step was weighted with memory and uncertainty. The betrayal of Selara Moonridge haunted her still, a knife turned deep in familial trust. The council's judgment and the fearful gazes of wolves who had once called her pack remained etched in her mind, pressing against her ribs as though she could feel the echoes of their doubt and fear radiating through the mist. And yet, beneath the tremor of old wounds, there was a flame, a stubborn, unyielding pulse of defiance that refused to be silenced. Raelen's presence was a steady anchor, yet it carried its own tension. He was beside her, yes, but not entirely at ease. His eyes, dark pools of conflicted emotion, scanned the shadows, noting the tremors in the earth and the unnatural stillness of the mist. Every instinct screamed caution, every heartbeat a silent warning. He wanted to speak, to reach for her hand, to assure her that she was not alone, yet the weight of leadership, of prophecy, of the unresolved dangers surrounding them kept him silent. The distance between them was small in space, but vast in understanding, stretched taut by all they had endured. A sudden tremor shook the roots beneath their paws, subtle yet deliberate, enough to stir frost from the branches and scatter the mist in ghostly swirls. Selara froze, nostrils flaring, ears twitching. Every muscle coiled, ready to strike, ready to flee, yet grounded by the sheer will of her presence. Her violet flames shimmered along her fingers, faint sparks illuminating the shadowed trees as if testing the forest for hidden threats. She could feel the pulse of unseen forces, old, patient, and dangerous, moving through the roots, through the soil, as if waiting for a moment to strike. Raelen's low growl, almost inaudible, drew her attention. His gaze was fixed on the shadows, the darkness curling at the edges of the mist in ways that defied natural explanation. There was intelligence there. Malice. Awareness. Not all that had been defeated atop Eclipse Altar was gone. Some threat, something older and darker, lingered, watching, calculating, waiting. Selara pressed forward, every step deliberate, controlled, yet the weight of exhaustion pressed heavily on her shoulders. Her paws ached, her muscles burned with fatigue, but the fire inside her lungs and veins refused to wane. Every pulse of violet energy reminded her that she had survived the fire of betrayal, the fury of the shadow beasts, and the chaos of rival packs, yet survival was only the beginning. She was no longer merely a girl running from her destiny. She was a wolf tempered by flame, guided by ancestors, and aware that the game had only just begun. A shadow moved among the trees, silent and fluid, darker than the night itself. Selara's gaze snapped to it, amber eyes narrowing, violet sparks flickering across her hands like a heartbeat made visible. The shape paused, watching, patient, calculating, and then slipped back into the fog, leaving only the echo of its presence. A warning, a promise, a tease of challenges yet to come. Raelen stepped closer, his voice low, reverent, and weighted with both awe and warning. Selara, whatever comes next, whatever waits in the darkness, we face it together. His words were soft, intimate, yet they carried the gravity of unspoken truths. They carried acknowledgement of the fire she had claimed, the power she had wielded, and the reality that the path ahead would demand every ounce of strength, every pulse of courage, and every thread of trust they had to offer each other. Selara's breath caught, her pulse quickening. The warmth of his presence grounded her, even as the forest whispered its omens around them. The tension between them, unspoken yet palpable, radiated like the violet flame within her, a reminder that even in darkness, even amid the weight of prophecy and betrayal, there was connection, there was hope, there was a spark of something sacred. Yet the forest itself did not lie. A tremor ran through the earth again, stronger this time, sending frost-cracked branches shivering and scattering the mist into jagged, fleeting shapes. Shadows moved in ways that defied natural laws, silent, purposeful, ominous. The air vibrated with the presence of something immense and waiting. Selara could feel it pressing against her mind, probing, assessing, aware of the fire she carried, aware of the bond that tied her to Raelen, aware of the prophecy that still lingered, unfinished, unresolved, incomplete. She exhaled slowly, grounding herself in the moment, in the fire that now pulsed like a living heartbeat, in the trust that she and Raelen had begun to forge amidst chaos. "We're not done yet," she whispered almost to herself, almost as a warning to the shadows that watched and waited. Her voice was calm, yet carried the weight of unyielding power and determination. The mist swirled around her, curling in response, embracing her, obscuring her form like a veil of intent and defiance. A voice, dark and melodic, drifted through the fog, not quite audible yet impossible to ignore. "She is not the only one. it whispered, a promise threaded with menace and inevitability. The words slid into the marrow of Selara's bones, sending a shiver down her spine even as her claws dug into the frost-hardened earth. She did not flinch. She did not retreat. Her fire flickered, casting violet light across the mist, cutting through the foreboding darkness like a beacon. Raelen's eyes met hers, and in that silent exchange, there was understanding, unspoken promise, and shared acknowledgement of the looming storm. "Then we rise together," he said, voice barely above the whisper of wind through the trees. And in that moment, amidst the swirling shadows and trembling earth, they became a single pulse of purpose, a convergence of fire and loyalty, defiance and courage, ready to face whatever darkness awaited them beyond the edge of Shadowfen Woods. The mist thickened, curling into serpentine shapes, and the forest seemed to shift and breathe with a consciousness all its own. Tremors whispered through the roots, carrying the weight of power yet unseen, danger yet unfaced. And still Selara and Raelen moved forward, step by cautious step, into the unknown, into the promise of battles, revelations, and trials that would test every fiber of their beings. And the last words lingered, spoken by no one yet echoing in every corner of the world. "The true Alpha has yet to rise." The statement hung heavy in the night air, prophetic, ominous, and impossible to ignore. Every rustle of mist, every tremor in the ground, every distant howl seemed to echo it, reminding the world and the audience that this story, this journey, was far from over. Selara Moonridge and Raelen Duskbane disappeared into the swirling mists of Shadowfen Woods, shadows among shadows, hearts alight with fire, and the world, every wolf, every rival, every spirit, left trembling at the edge of anticipation, haunted by the question that would not fade. What comes next, and who will rise when the night finally breaks? The mist swallowed them completely, leaving only the flicker of violet flame and the echo of destiny unfulfilled. And in that silence the story waited, hungry, unresolved, and irresistible, calling to every heart willing to follow the wolf who refused to be anyone's pawn, the Alpha who had yet to claim her full power, and the love that would endure across shadow, fire, and prophecy.